And welcome back, everyone, to session 3 of the EIT Manufacturing Summit 2020, the very first summit for EIT Manufacturing. My name is Karen Helmstead. If you're just joining now, we've had quite an exciting morning already and heard about the EIT and how it will be developing in the next budget period through to 2027 with Horizon Europe. And now we're going to be turning our attention to session 3, which is entitled How European Manufacturing Can Win by Working with Startups. And it is a great pleasure to welcome Adiari Vasquez, who is CEO and founder of Braver Ventures. Adiari is a Harvard-educated engineer. She's a venture capital investor, deep tech expert, and venture builder. And with Braver Ventures, she advises founders and investors looking to grow deep tech startups. So she's joining us this morning from Portugal to give us her take on how European manufacturing can win by collaborating with startups. Adiari, can you hear me? First of all, let's establish we've got a good connection.
I can hear you just fine.
Wonderful. Then I am absolutely pleased to give you the floor. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Well, thank you for that introduction and good morning to everybody. As we're connecting here virtually for the EIT Manufacturing Summit, I'm reminded of something that has become all too familiar throughout this year. The only thing that stays constant is change. Take technology, for example. Technology is being adopted at an accelerating rate. Over the last decades, we've seen a profound digital adoption and transformation. Over the last decades, it has also become harder for leading companies to stay at the top of their game, with the lifespan of listed companies getting shorter and shorter over time. We've all heard the stories of companies like Kodak and Nokia, which at one point dominated their industries and then within a fairly short period of time lost that status. And the reasons why this happens are complex, but a recurring factor is the need to adapt to changes in technology and market expectations. To better adapt to oncoming change, it is important for companies to be able to look ahead and around the corner, to understand how tech is advancing and how their customer markets are evolving. In the manufacturing industry, for example, we are seeing major changes. On the one hand, there are technology forces that are driving change. Breakthroughs in areas like artificial intelligence or AI are boosting manufacturing productivity and opening up new opportunities. Industrial robots can perform tasks with higher flexibility and accuracy than ever before. In many applications, these robots perform tasks which would be physically demanding or dangerous, therefore protecting human workers. 3D printing is allowing players to meet increasing demand for fast prototyping and customization. Industrial IoT is using sensors to transform physical information into digital assets, which can be analyzed and optimized in real time. New chemistries will make it more cost-effective to store energy and transition to renewables. Advances in chemistry will also make it possible to make carbon-neutral industrial feedstocks, like hydrogen. Industrial biotech will make it possible to use biology to manufacture materials like plastics and fuels with a dramatically lower carbon footprint. At the same time that these tech advances are happening, the impact of climate change is of growing concern. The way we live our modern lives contributes 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere every year, with manufacturing contributing a third of those emissions. To be clear, the manufacturing sector makes the goods and materials that we rely on, from our phones to the soap we use to wash our hands, which has been a lot in 2020. And the pandemic has brought to the forefront just how important it is that this sector be resilient to the unexpected. It has also become clear that to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we need to reduce and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors. Like the tech changes, this transition to a low carbon economy will be a driving force of change for European manufacturing. Accelerating this transition is the commitment of many nations to reduce emissions, as well as growing customer awareness and market demand for green, sustainably manufactured goods. Transitioning to a low carbon manufacturing industry has evolved from a nice to have to a must have. In the face of these oncoming changes, it might be tempting to say that the breakthroughs will come from others or from elsewhere in the world. But I see these forces of change as an opportunity for European manufacturing to thrive. Why Europe? Well, first, Europe has the scale. The EU is the world's biggest exporter of manufactured goods and is a leader in producing high quality products. Europe also has the talent. The EU is a powerhouse of technical know-how, accounting for nearly 20% of global R&D with less than 7% of the world's population. In the area of AI, for example, Europe has consistently published more papers than other geographies, until recently when China has taken the lead. The UK has been the leading contributor to the European AI talent pool, but other hubs for AI talent can be found in France, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, and Sweden. Europe also has the consciousness. The EU is a leader in climate change awareness, and European youth have even galvanized a global movement for climate positive change. At the same time, Europe is experiencing a boom in startups with an explosion of innovation. In my work as a venture capital investor and venture builder focused on industrial tech, I've had the honor of speaking with hundreds of these startups. And these startups are drawing from a uniquely European talent base with deep technical know-how, a high level of sustainability awareness, and many with previous experiences working at some of the world's best quality manufacturing companies. Many are developing business opportunities, leveraging tech advances and this impending transition to a low carbon economy. And I'm so excited about the future that these startups are shaping. Take, for example, Munich-based startup Magazino, which develops intelligent mobile robots that perceive their environment and can work with humans to make logistics more flexible and efficient. A startup in Prague called Neuron Soundware uses AI and IoT to listen in on industrial systems. By monitoring mechanical sound, they can detect failures early on and predict maintenance needs. In Stockholm, startup Engenzyme is building the future of manufacturing with biology. Inspired on how living cells produce the chemicals they need to live, Engenzyme's platform could one day make manufacturing of things like food ingredients and bulk chemicals more sustainable and with lower costs. Plastic Free, an EIT manufacturing startup, is also building a more sustainable future through its technology for making a renewable material that looks and works like conventional plastic. And these are just a few examples. Over the next 2 days, we will hear from other innovators that are leveraging tech to build a smarter and more sustainable manufacturing future. For more mature manufacturing players, collaborating with innovative startups presents an opportunity to adopt solutions which can make them more resilient to oncoming change. Leading companies engage with startups. In fact, there is a strong correlation between the ranking of companies and their engagement rate with startups. But startup collaboration is not only for large manufacturing corporates. Smaller manufacturing players are also more agile, making it possible for them to more quickly set up collaborations with startups. There's no one correct way for the manufacturing sector to engage with startups. From the conversations that I have had with startup entrepreneurs, high up on their wish list is partnering with players who can pilot their solutions and become customers. Also on the wish list is partnering with individuals in those organizations who can share sector expertise and provide feedback. For established players, collaborating with startups can be a tool to look ahead and around the corner. By engaging with startups and adopting their solutions, established players will not only be better equipped and more resilient to the oncoming change, but can also gain a competitive edge that allows them to thrive in what is an increasingly competitive global landscape. By working together and leveraging Europe's scale, tech know-how, and climate consciousness, European manufacturing players, big and small, established and upstarts, have the opportunity to thrive in this transition to a smarter, more productive, and sustainable low-carbon industry. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Adiari, for a very, very interesting and comprehensive presentation. Obviously, change is the only constant, as we know, and adaptation is crucial. And manufacturing, obviously, on this journey to become more resilient and greener and to enable that transition to a low-carbon economy that is so very necessary. I do have a couple of questions here for you because you talked about this collaboration between larger established firms and startups and obviously allowing them to benefit from that energy. Some concrete examples just quickly of how the larger manufacturing companies can engage with startups quite practically.
Absolutely. So I think there's different ways to engage with startups. I mentioned venture capital, for example. So some corporates choose to invest in startups or invest in funds that then invest in startups. And that's a way for them to engage with innovation. An example of this is the team where I previously worked, which is called Next 47, which is a venture fund that Siemens set up to invest in startups. But of course, this requires having firepower to invest. So I think another example that is more capital lean is you can become a client of companies, of startups specifically. So for example, at the BMW Startup Garage, they select interesting startups and then commit to being early clients, which I think is a model that can work for smaller manufacturing companies as well. And there's other ways. You can host conferences, startup competitions, you can sponsor events, or even offer small workspaces where startups can come and meet and test their solutions. So I think the most important thing is to first, as an established player, think about what it is that you want to gain from that collaboration and the time frame that you want to do it in. And remember, it's okay to start small and then grow in your engagement, or even switch modes of collaboration depending on the results. So it's okay to sort of take a lesson from startups and iterate in the process.
So I think the two ecosystems are proving to be very beneficial to one another, and also a lot of interesting ideas can be taken on both sides. Now, you mentioned, we appreciate that you mentioned all of the positives, all of the incredible strengths that Europe has, the incredible contributions it's made to innovation. But let's not forget that in the early part of the 21st century, Europe was considered very much to be lagging behind the US in terms of scaling up of early stage innovations, or for instance, transfer of knowledge, bringing startup tech to market. Now, you've spent so many years in the US. To what extent has that improved with the EU's recent innovation focus, and what has to happen for Europe to be first in class in that respect?
Yeah, that's a great point and a great question. The first thing I should admit is I'm actually not European. I was born in a US territory in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico, and lived most of my adult life in the US, in Boston. So I'm sharing my perspective here after living in Europe for 6 years and feeling like an adopted European. But to your point, first, I think comparing startups and venture capital in Europe and the US is a bit like putting a toddler and an adult in the same room and comparing how quickly they can run and how much weight they can lift. So absolutely, when you think about Silicon Valley, this is a highly evolved startup and venture ecosystem that started in the 1960s, and it's continued to grow in its success. On this side of the pond, what we have is a set of much younger ecosystems. But I do think we're getting better. Europe has been traditionally good in the tech and science, as you pointed out, but then lacked in that transition into products and services that can be brought to market. And I think programs in Europe like Horizon 2020 have done a lot to narrow that gap. And of course, yes, there is more we can do. When you look at venture capital, for example, the amount deployed in the US is still about 4 to 5 times as much as what you see in Europe. So I think we need to continue to put the structures in place to make sure that startups can grow here in Europe. And I think one way to do that is to attract venture capital in Europe and make sure that we can support these startups and really put some firepower behind promising startups. And I think by doing that, we can avoid some of the talent drain that inevitably happens when there isn't sufficient support for these startups and these entrepreneurs. One last point is also that I think one hurdle to growth that I see in Europe for startups is the fragmented European ecosystem. And I think having a true single market in Europe would also go a long way towards helping startups scale here in Europe.
Well, and obviously, as we heard earlier, sort of overcoming a lot of that fragmentation, getting rid of it, building bridges and creating connections between these different ecosystems obviously is the purpose and mission of EIT manufacturing. Obviously, younger ecosystems here in Europe, but moving forward. And thank you very much to Adiare Vasquez in Lisbon this morning, taking the time to let us know how we can thrive with collaboration with startups. Thanks very much for joining us. And on that note, it is time, dear participants, for us to take about a 15-minute break. I'm not sure if it's going to be quite that long, so keep an eye on your screen, but there is definitely time to stretch those legs, go get a cup of tea, and we will see you after the break with session number 4, and Klaus Bates will be joining me once again, the CEO of EIT Manufacturing. Take good care and see you very, very soon.
EIT Manufacturing is an innovation community, connecting close to 60 leading manufacturing actors across 17 member states with one aim: to make Europe a global leader in manufacturing innovation. In order to achieve our goal, we see 4 main areas of transformation: people and robots, additive production technologies, waste-free manufacturing, and digital platforms. Our objective is to deliver added value through education, innovation, and business creation. In our first year of operation, we've already led a number of successful initiatives, including launching more than 80 activities, supporting 28 innovation projects, receiving over 180 applications to our first ever Boost Up competition for European ventures, collaborating with more than 2,000 students or learners, creating 5 EIT manufacturing labeled education programs, and more than 500 learning nuggets. Our work has only just started, and we look forward to another successful year of transforming Europe into a global leader in innovative, competitive, and sustainable manufacturing. #Manufacturing Impact.